What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward. Talk about what President Trump just said that's very important for the stock market and how all of this will affect the way the market's about to move. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. Moomoo is an amazing global brokerage account that consists of many exclusive offers. If you sign up and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60. You also qualify for an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash, and the offer ends on June 3rd. Anyways, as far as the market's going, okay, one thing you'll see is that SPY is on a bit of a decline right now, which is what we were talking about in my video from yesterday, a small dip coming. But the thing about that dip is that if we decline more and we end up losing support right here at 5,621 spot, we could get closer to this gap fill down here at 558. It is possible we dip a little bit more. But once we hit this trend line, will we see some kind of bounce back up? If we end up getting back above like 565, I do expect us to push back up towards these highs. So this depends on a lot of different factors, and we'll talk about that real quick. And I'll break down the charts. So the White House has said this morning that China is surrendering to the 125% tariffs, and that's some very, very big news. But it's worth mentioning that despite this surrender, which is how they describe it, they're saying that there's going to be a lot of negotiations coming, and this could be very, very impactful for the markets if we see what ends up happening. President Trump also said this morning that he is willing to meet up with any CEO that wants to raise prices due to tariffs. So he just said that. He also mentioned that when asked about if the US is in a recession, he did say that anything could happen, but he doesn't think that we're in one or that we're going to enter one. He thinks that we're in a great economy, at least right now. That's what he is saying so far. On top of this, I want to add on to the fact that he mentioned that he doesn't want to get rid of Jerome Powell now. He said he would not dismiss him in 2026. So that's what we're hearing from President Trump so far. That's the latest update from the White House and him. But there was some big news that came out. So the market was on a tear, but now it's slowing down a bit, and there's many reasons why this is happening. One of the reasons is because of Berkshire Hathaway slowing down. Warren Buffett is going to be calling it quits, according to reports. This means that the board has agreed that they want to replace the 94-year-old CEO. So that's some big news that's been coming out so far. Looking at their overall numbers, it wasn't really the best for them as well. Although he didn't really call out the tariffs in particular, he did say that trade should not be a weapon. And we did see their operating earnings end up dipping quite a bit. We did see a bigger than expected drop in them, as the operating earnings are down about 14%. It's not the best of news. And that's part of why we saw um, a bit of a dip. They also mentioned that part of the dip is not just because of the tariffs, but also because of the wildfires that happened in California, because of the insurance underwriting profits that had to get declines as a result of that. And then there's other reasons as well, so keep that in mind. Besides that, we'll have to see what ends up happening with the tariffs and such. Berkshire Hathaway is down a bit, and that's part of why the market's dipping. Alongside some more news, President Trump also mentioned yesterday that he's open to the possibility that many of the tariffs may be permanent, right? He's not going to just get rid of everything when we have these trade deals, because he wants to incentivize manufacturers to start building in the USA. That's what he said, and that could be another reason why the market's down a little bit. Anyways, so despite the market being down, today is Monday at 9:45 a.m. We have the S&P Global Composites and Services PMI reports. Then at 10 o'clock a.m. we have the ISM Services PMI, business activity, employment, new orders, and prices, how all of this could be affecting the markets. So this is going to cause a big move at 10 a.m. We'll see if this launches the market up or down. And on top of this, I want to add that we have Palantir announcing earnings after market close. So expect high volatility at 10 a.m. What do I think is going to happen from here? Well, it depends on if we could hold 562 or not. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a small dip like this. We do dip a little bit more towards this trend line and consolidate, but then I'll be looking to see, do we get some kind of balance move back up to fill this upper gap, or do we end up dumping a lot lower? Basically, we're in a range right here between 555 and 567. If we lose 555, we're going to be really bearish. This could be dumping to the 540s. If we break past 567, we're looking more bullish, looking for the 570s. But as of right now, we're in the middle. So I wouldn't be surprised if we come down towards this, there's this gap to fill down here. If we hit this like trend line and we consolidate just a bit, but then I'll be watching to see if we get some kind of bounce move or not. So we'll see how that ends up going. If we get some balance with buyers stepping in or not as time goes on, there's this gap to fill over here. So watch that very, very closely. So we'll see how well things end up going, at least from this point on. But I do see some consolidation here. We'll have to see what the reaction is if we come up to fill this gap. So keep that in mind. But it depends on the data just to be safe. On the QQQ, we might decline a little bit. I think we could be dipping to like 482.5, maybe a little bit lower, depending on how low we go before we consolidate. Then, if we end up getting not the best of data, we could be dipping all the way down to like 478. If that fails us, we could be dipping a lot more. And to be bullish, we want to break 490. So we'll see if we come back up to fill this gap or not. It depends. If we get back up of 485, we're looking for that gap fill above. And if we end up losing 478, we're looking for a bigger dump. I do think we decline to 42 and consolidate for some time, but then we'll see if we get a bounce or not, because every time the market's dipping, we're just getting bought back up. So watch that very closely. And by the way, about SPY, I forgot to mention this. If we get back above 564, then I think we fill the gap back up and we start to retest these highs. If we lose 562 flat, we could be dipping closer to like not only 560 but 558. So keep that in mind, guys. The market might decline a bit and consolidate, but then we'll see if we get a bounce to fill that gap or not, depending on this data. On the IWM, if we end up losing support right here at 197, watch that very closely. I do expect us to dip to fill this gap to 195. If we break past 198.96, we're looking for this gap fill back up to 200. Looks like it could go either way. I do see a small decline, though. We might be dipping closer to like 197 first, but then we'll see if we get a bounce or not after that, depending on our data. But look for a small decline to 197 or below, and we'll see what the reaction happens to be like. For ES, I'm seeing the same thing essentially going on. So one thing that's worth mentioning is that this is already on a decline. So there might be some bearish momentum when we open up. So keep that in mind. There might be a little bit of a bearish move, but there's no guarantee it's going to last forever because, with everything coming out, we could be looking for a very, very big reaction. So with that being said, what do I think is going to happen from this point on? Well, basically, I wouldn't be surprised if we retest 5640. So there might be a small decline coming. So make sure you're prepared for that on ES. But that's going to be where our support is at our 20 EMA. We'll have to see if that holds or not. And as you can tell, we're kind of consolidating. So I do see a test of like 5640. We need to get back above like 5680 to really start pushing towards these highs. If we lose support here, we could be dipping towards like 5600 flat. So we'll just have to see what the reaction looks like. So watch this very, very closely. But I think we're going to be coming down to this 5640 area, maybe a little bit lower, consolidate like this, and we'll see if we get a bounce again to fill this gap. So I'll be giving this some time just to be safe. Watch for that as time goes on. On NQ, we might be retesting 19,900, maybe a little bit lower. We'll have to see if we could hold support right here. If not, we could be dipping to like 19,700. Then it depends on the data. Does the data launch us back up, or do we get a launch back up later on, or do we end up dumping? If we lose 19,700, we're looking for a dip back down. And if we get back above 20,100, I do think we're going to retest these highs. So I'll watch this at least very closely as time goes on. For Bitcoin, we're technically on a bit of a downtrend here. We have to just see if we get back above 95,000. If not, I just see consolidation, maybe a bit of a dip here as time goes on. For Tesla, Tesla, in my opinion, is just kind of range bound here. So we have this 292 areas resistance we like to reject here. And we like to get bought back up around 275. So we're kind of going back and forth. I do think we might be declining to about 281 or so. We might be declining towards this trend line as we consolidate. And we'll see if we break out higher or lower, depending on which way we end up wanting to go. But I do see a little bit of consolidation here. I do think we dip a little bit towards like 280 and consolidate, at least for the time being. On NVIDIA, I'm seeing the same thing. We're looking to see if 112 holds. If not, we have a gap to all the way down to like 111. I think we might be declining a little bit to like 111 or so. We got to break 115 to remain bullish, but I do think we dip a little bit right here towards 111 to 110, and we'll see what the reaction is. Apple's on a bit of a downtrend. We're looking to see if this blue trend line holds or not. If it doesn't hold, this could be dipping towards like 200 flat. So watch this blue trend line. If it breaks, we're looking for 200. It might decline a bit, at least for now. On Coinbase, we're forming a flag here. We're going to be watching to see if we can get a bounce soon. might decline towards like 200 flats. And if we could get a bounce here, we're looking for that gap pull back up to 205 as we consolidate, and we'll see if we get a breakout or not. So give it some time. For Amazon, we're also range bound right here. We basically have this 185 area support and 192 is resistance. Might consolidate and dip to 185, so give it some time. For Meta, we might be dipping towards 585 to about 575 in that range, and we'll see if we get a bounce. Might be dipping a bit here, so give it some time. Um, Microsoft is looking weaker. We could be declining towards 424, if not 416. So give this some time, but I do think there's going to be a bit of a decline here towards 425. For Google's also technically on a bit of an uptrend. As you guys can tell, we're making higher highs and higher lows, and might be dipping to the blue trend line here around 162, though, and we'll see if we bounce. So keep that in mind. The VIX right now is up, but keep in mind there's a big gap below. I'm not sure if the VIX is about to reject here or not. Obviously, it's going to depend on this data. But here's the thing. There's a big gap below. So if we start losing, just for confirmation, like 23.8 or so on the VIX, this might start coming down to fill this gap, and that could be a bullish indicator for the markets. But if we end up breaking above like 25, this is going to remain, bullish, and that would be more bearish for the markets. So break 25, this is going to break out higher and lose 23.8. We're going to be dipping. We'll see if the VIX rejects or not. So we'll see what the reaction is once we get this data. Do we see a rejection on the VIX or not? It might try to climb a bit higher, but then we'll see if we get a rejection. If it rejects and comes down, that would be bullish for the market. The market will try to bounce, but we'll see depending on what this data looks like. Okay, so with that being said, I would recommend just watching the levels I have right now. I do think the market might decline a bit and consolidate, but we'll see if we get a bounce or not, depending on this data. That's a little bit hard to predict. So watch the levels I called out, and we'll see which way we end up going. Be very patient nonetheless. Thank you for listening, and peace out.